The Arizona sun beat down relentlessly on Harmony Ridge, baking the adobe walls a deeper ochre and shimmering off the distant, jagged mountains. A thick, earthy scent, mingled with the dry, resinous perfume of mesquite, hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the arid landscape that cradled this small, dusty town. It was just another ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the kind where time seemed to stretch lazily, mirroring the long shadows cast by the saguaro cacti. The familiar rumble of the old yellow school bus, its windows wide open to embrace the meager breeze, echoed faintly as it navigated the winding dirt roads, carrying the day's last echoes of childhood laughter back towards homes. Life here moved with a comforting, predictable rhythm, a quiet symphony of community where every face was known, every routine sacred. Inside the rattling metal shell, 12-year-old Ethan sat by a window, his slender frame almost imperceptible amidst the boisterous energy of his schoolmates. His dark eyes, remarkably keen and observant, absorbed every detail of the passing landscape, the shimmer of heat rising from the road, a hawk circling lazily overhead, the subtle shift in the dust clouds kicked up by the bus's tires. Mute from birth, Ethan's world was a tapestry woven from sights, vibrations, and the silent language of movement. He felt the subtle hum of the engine beneath him, a familiar thrum that usually soothed, but today, an almost imperceptible tremor, a discordant note in its steady rhythm, began to prickle at his awareness. A tiny, unsettling whisper ignored by the louder world around him. The bus, which moments before had been a vessel of carefree chatter, suddenly emitted a jarring metallic groan, a sound that scraped against the usual symphony of youthful voices. A jolt, more violent than a typical bump, rattled through the worn seats, sending a ripple of confused murmurs through the children. The driver, Mr. Henderson, a man whose easy smile was as constant as the Arizona sun, gripped the wheel tighter, his knuckles whitening as the bus veered unexpectedly towards the shoulder. The engine note, once a steady drone, began to hiccup, a strained, gasping cough that betrayed a deeper distress. A collective hush fell over the children, their laughter abruptly silenced, replaced by a growing unease as the bus swerved again, fighting for purchase on the loose gravel. Then, with a terrifying screech that tore through the air like a banshee's wail, the front wheels locked, sending the heavy vehicle into an uncontrollable skid. Time seemed to warp, stretching into an agonizing eternity as the bus, a behemoth of yellow steel, lurched violently, tipping onto its side. The world outside became a dizzying blur of sky, dust, and mesquite bushes, followed by a deafening crash as it plunged down a small, unseen embankment. Metal shrieked, glass shattered explosively, and bodies were flung like rag dolls amidst the splintering seats. A sickening crunch marked its final, dramatic overturn, leaving behind a deafening silence, punctuated only by the groans of the injured and the frantic cries of the terrified. Dust, thick as a shroud, billowed into the air, momentarily obscuring the chaos within the overturned bus. The once familiar aroma of dry earth was now sharply tainted by the acrid, metallic tang of burning oil and, more ominously, the sweet, cloying smell of raw gasoline. The driver, Mr. Henderson, lay slumped and motionless against the steering wheel, a dark stain spreading across his forehead. Children, disoriented and whimpering, struggled against twisted seatbelts and debris, some visibly injured. Outside, a chilling snap-crackle-pop punctuated the silence as a high-tension power line, ripped from its pole by the impact, writhed on the ground, spitting angry blue sparks dangerously close to the bus's crumpled body. Panic, a cold, creeping dread, began to seep into the dazed consciousness of the few adults still able to comprehend. Ethan, miraculously propelled clear of the worst impact, scrambled out of a broken window, his small body surprisingly agile. His senses, already heightened by his silence, immediately registered the overwhelming stench of gasoline, the ominous crackle of electricity, and the shimmering pool of fuel rapidly spreading beneath the bus. He saw the dangerously sparking cable, just inches from the bus's hot underbelly. His dark eyes darted frantically, searching for an adult, a conscious mind to grasp the escalating peril. He pointed, jabbed, and gestured with desperate urgency towards the twin threats, a silent scream of warning trapped within him. But in the escalating pandemonium, amidst the shouts and cries for help, his frantic signals were lost, misinterpreted as mere shock, as the volatile air around the bus seemed to thicken with unspoken dread. The acrid smell of gasoline and the frantic screams of his classmates faded, replaced by the familiar quiet hum of his own existence, a silence that had been his constant companion since birth. Ethan's world was usually ordered, a precise symphony of visual cues and subtle vibrations. Each morning, before the Arizona sun had fully breached the mountains, he would be up, helping his mother with the chores on their small farm on the outskirts of Harmony Ridge. The rhythmic swish of the broom against the packed earth of their adobe home, the crisp scent of fresh tortillas cooking on the comal, the gentle nuzzle of the family burro, these were the textures and movements that formed the fabric of his days. He found comfort in repetition, in the predictable patterns of nature and labor, his dark eyes missing nothing, absorbing every nuance of light shifting across the desert floor, every tremor in the ground beneath his bare feet, a silent guardian of his small, predictable world, until now. Communication, for Ethan, was an intricate dance of hands and eyes, a silent ballet of urgent gestures and expressive facial contortions that spoke volumes to those patient enough to truly see. He carried a small, worn notebook and a stubby pencil in his back pocket, a constant extension of his will, ready to scrawl out thoughts with astonishing speed and precision when gestures proved insufficient. Lily, his best friend, understood him better than anyone, her own hands often mirroring his in a fluid, unspoken conversation. Adults, however, often saw only silence, interpreting his earnest attempts as mere shyness or a vacant stare, a dismissive wave of the hand cutting off his desperate explanations. His comfort, a smooth, polished river stone he always kept in his palm, was a tactile anchor in a world that often felt too loud, too chaotic, and perpetually out of sync with his internal rhythm. Within that quiet world, Ethan harbored a profound wellspring of dreams, not of grand pronouncements or heroic speeches, but of quiet understanding. He yearned for the day when his insights, his unique way of seeing the world, would be recognized for their inherent value, not dismissed because they lacked a vocal component. He often imagined himself as a silent architect, building intricate mental models of the world, identifying its hidden flaws and potential solutions. His motivation stemmed from a deep-seated desire to contribute, to be useful, particularly to his family, and the close-knit community of Harmony Ridge, whose familiar faces and routines were the very bedrock of his existence. He saw beauty in the often overlooked details, the precise angle of a hawk's wing, the subtle shift in desert winds, the intricate network of roots beneath a mesquite tree, a world vibrant with unspoken information. This heightened sensory perception, honed by years of silent observation, had forged in Ethan an extraordinary talent for visual and strategic analysis. He possessed an almost uncanny ability to dissect complex situations, breaking them down into their fundamental components, identifying variables and predicting outcomes with startling accuracy. On the farm, he could spot a weakness in the irrigation system long before the water began to pool, or predict the precise moment a storm would break by the subtle shifts in atmospheric pressure felt through the ground. His mind worked like a sophisticated, silent computer, processing visual data at an incredible speed, connecting seemingly unrelated details into a cohesive, actionable understanding. It was a gift that had saved crops and prevented mishaps on countless occasions, though few ever truly attributed the solutions to his quiet genius. The irony was a bitter pill. The boy who could see everything, predict almost anything, was the one perpetually unheard. His insights, so clear and logical within the confines of his own mind, became frustratingly opaque when translated through frantic gestures to a world insistent on spoken words. He had often felt the sting of dismissal, the casual wave of an adult's hand, the patronizing pat on the head, as his silent warnings went unheeded. Mr. Caldwell, in particular, embodied this profound misunderstanding, his gruff pronouncements about Ethan being, quote, defective, echoing the larger societal prejudice that equated silence with incapacity. The bus accident was the most catastrophic manifestation of this disconnect, his desperate attempts to convey the looming danger of the gasoline and the sparking wires lost in the cacophony of fear and confusion. Yet, even amidst the escalating terror and the overwhelming stench of fuel, a flicker of resolve ignited within Ethan. His eyes, sharper than any spoken word, had already mapped the intricate web of peril and potential escape routes. He saw the precise drip of gasoline accelerating, the increasingly erratic dance of blue sparks from the high-tension cable, and the desperate, dazed expressions of Ms. Evans and the other trapped children. His unique talent, his silent analytical mind, was no longer a hidden gift but a crucial, undeniable imperative. He knew what needed to be done, the exact sequence of actions that could avert disaster. The problem wasn't seeing the solution, it was making the chaotic, unseeing world understand it, a challenge that now, more than ever, demanded his silent, strategic voice. A low moan escaped Ms. Evans' lips as her eyes fluttered open, the world a disorienting kaleidoscope of splintered metal and dust. Her head throbbed with a dull ache, and a sharp pain radiated from her twisted ankle, but the immediate, visceral terror of the crash slowly gave way to a teacher's instinct. The children. She pushed herself up, wincing, her gaze sweeping the chaotic interior of the overturned bus. Disoriented whimpers and cries filled the air, a terrifying symphony of fear. Her eyes, still hazy, instinctively sought out Ethan, whose silent presence was often a calming anchor in her classroom. She saw him, small but resolute, outside a jagged window, his frantic gestures, a silent alarm she couldn't yet fully decipher, but whose urgency resonated deep within her dazed mind, cutting through the fog of her own pain. Just moments later, the first figure burst through the swirling dust cloud, not a rescuer, but Mr. Caldwell, his face a mask of bluster and self-importance. He was a man whose voice usually boomed across Harmony Ridge, dictating terms and opinions, and now it sliced through the air, sharp and unhelpful. "Everyone, stay calm. I'll handle this," he barked, striding towards the wreckage, seemingly more concerned with asserting control than assessing the true danger. His eyes, though scanning the scene, seemed to deliberately skip over Ethan, who was still frantically pointing, a silent sentinel of warning. Mr. Caldwell's ingrained prejudice, his belief in Ethan's defectiveness, blinded him to the boy's desperate signals, dismissing them as the random flailings of a frightened child rather than a critical alert. Inside the bus, amidst the broken seats and scattered backpacks, Lily, her usually bright eyes wide with terror, struggled to unbuckle her seatbelt. Her gaze immediately locked onto Ethan, her best friend, whose silent language she understood better than anyone. He was outside, moving with an urgency that transcended mere fear, his small frame silhouetted against the swirling dust. She saw him pointing, saw the desperate intensity in his eyes, and a primal fear for him, and for what he was trying to communicate, seized her. Other younger children, whimpering and disoriented, also turned their tear-streaked faces towards Ethan, an unspoken trust in his quiet presence, a silent plea for guidance from the boy who always seemed to know what to do, even when no one listened. Ethan, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, continued his silent plea, his hands carving urgent shapes in the air, his eyes fixed on Ms. Evans. He pointed to the ominous puddle spreading beneath the bus, then to the high-tension cable writhing like a venomous snake, spitting sparks onto the dry earth. "Gasoline! Fire! Electrical!" his silent voice screamed, but the words caught in the air, unheard. Mr. Caldwell, now closer, spotted Ethan's frantic movements, and, with a dismissive wave, snapped, "Boy, get back. You'll only get in the way." He then turned his attention to Ms. Evans barking instructions, completely oblivious to the real, escalating danger that Ethan's silent warnings were desperately trying to convey. The very air around them, thickening with unspoken peril. A sudden, sharp crackle ripped through the air, louder than before, as a particularly virulent blue spark leaped from the downed power line, searing a small patch of mesquite nearby. The acrid smell of ozone mingled sickeningly with the cloying sweetness of raw gasoline, now visibly pooling faster beneath the bus. The ominous symphony of danger was growing, no longer a faint whisper, but a rising crescendo. Even Mr. Caldwell paused, his bluster momentarily deflating as his eyes, finally, were drawn to the sparking cable and the growing wet stain. Panic, a more immediate, visceral kind, began to spread through the small crowd of arriving townsfolk, their shouted questions and contradictory advice adding to the escalating chaos, each second bringing them closer to the brink. Ms. Evans, despite her pain, managed to push herself further, her mind struggling to connect Ethan's desperate gestures with the growing sensory evidence of danger. Her eyes darted from the pooling gasoline to the sparking wire, then back to Ethan's intensely pleading face, a terrifying jigsaw puzzle beginning to click into place. Mr. Caldwell, meanwhile, was now shouting orders about moving the bus, completely misinterpreting the most immediate threat. Lily, still trapped, watched Ethan with a mix of fear and unwavering trust, her small hand reaching out towards him. All of Harmony Ridge's hopes, fears, and prejudices were now converging at this single, catastrophic point, with the silent boy, the dazed teacher, the boisterous elder, and the terrified children, all caught in the rapidly tightening vice of imminent disaster. The air, already thick with dust and the metallic tang of ruin, now pulsed with a new, terrifying rhythm. The distant wail of sirens, faint at first, grew louder, but offered no immediate solace against the escalating peril. More townsfolk, drawn by the ominous plume of smoke and the frantic shouts, began to arrive, their initial shock quickly morphing into a collective, bewildered panic. Their faces, etched with concern and fear, reflected the growing understanding of the catastrophe before them. The pooling gasoline, a dark, viscous stain spreading relentlessly from beneath the bus, shimmered menacingly in the harsh Arizona sun, its fumes rising like an invisible, suffocating shroud. Each fresh crackle from the downed power line, each angry blue spark that danced erratically on the parched earth, sent a fresh wave of terror through the onlookers, whose shouts of alarm and contradictory advice only added to the terrifying cacophony, drowning out any coherent thought. Ms. Evans, despite the throbbing pain in her ankle, dragged herself closer to the broken window, her gaze fixed on Ethan. She saw the raw, desperate urgency in his eyes, a silent scream that resonated with a primal fear now gripping her own heart. She tried to shout, to articulate the danger Ethan was conveying, but her voice was hoarse, lost in the escalating din. Mr. Caldwell, meanwhile, had taken center stage, his booming voice attempting to impose order, but only succeeding in amplifying the chaos. "Someone get a rope! We need to pull it back upright," he bellowed, completely misjudging the immediate threat. His words, though loud, were empty of true understanding, a hollow drumbeat against the rising tide of panic, a stark contrast to the silent, acute perception of the boy he so readily dismissed. Ethan, seeing Ms. Evans struggle in Mr. Caldwell's misguided efforts, felt a surge of frustrated despair. He continued to point, to gesture, to trace the deadly arc of the power line and the spreading pool of fuel with his hands, his small body vibrating with the intensity of his unspoken warning. He tried to grab Mr. Caldwell's sleeve, to force his attention to the true danger, but the man merely brushed him off impatiently, his eyes scanning the scene for a group of strong men to organize, completely oblivious to the ticking time bomb beneath their feet. The limitations of spoken language, of conventional thought, were starkly evident. The adults, trapped in their own noisy panic, simply could not perceive the subtle, yet critical, signs that screamed disaster to Ethan's heightened senses, leaving him unheard amidst the escalating peril. "Boy, I told you to stay back." Mr. Caldwell snarled, his face contorted in a mix of irritation and fear as he finally turned to confront Ethan, whose insistent gestures were becoming an undeniable nuisance. "You're just scaring the others. Go find your mother. This is no place for a boy like you." His words, laced with disdain, cut through Ethan more deeply than any physical blow, reinforcing the societal prejudice that equated his muteness with intellectual deficiency. He even took a step, physically interposing himself between Ethan and Ms. Evans, effectively blocking the crucial line of silent communication. The older man's dismissive glare, a familiar barrier to Ethan's insights, cemented the bitter reality that his most vital warnings were not just unheard, but actively suppressed by the very people he desperately sought to protect. A sudden, violent surge of electricity ripped through the downed power line, sending a shower of angry sparks directly onto the parched earth beside the growing gasoline puddle. A small, dry mesquite branch, barely visible a moment before, instantly burst into a tiny, hungry flame, its acrid smoke mingling with the sweet, cloying scent of fuel. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers, their panicked shouts now tinged with genuine terror. The air crackled with palpable tension, the heat from the small fire a stark, horrifying beacon against the bus. The metal skin of the vehicle, superheated by the sun and friction, seemed to hum ominously, a silent countdown ticking beneath the surface, each second bringing the inevitable closer, the danger now undeniable, even to the most oblivious. Inside the bus, Lily, her small face streaked with tears and dust, watched the tiny flame flicker, her eyes widening with dawning horror. She looked at Ethan, then at the sparking wire, then back at Ethan, a silent plea passing between them. Mr. Caldwell, finally seeing the real, immediate threat of the fire, began to shout contradictory orders, his booming voice now laced with genuine fear, adding to the chaotic din. The other adults, frozen in indecision, looked from the burning branch to the trapped children, their faces etched with despair. The conventional solutions had failed, and the clock was ticking, a silent, terrifying countdown. All eyes, though unknowingly, would soon turn to the silent boy outside, the only one who seemed to truly grasp the intricate puzzle of peril, but how could he make them understand before it was too late? The air, already thick with dust and the metallic tang of ruin, now pulsed with a new, terrifying rhythm. The distant wail of sirens, faint at first, grew louder, but offered no immediate solace against the escalating peril. More townsfolk, drawn by the ominous plume of smoke and the frantic shouts, began to arrive, their initial shock quickly morphing into a collective, bewildered panic. Their faces, etched with concern and fear, reflected the growing understanding of the catastrophe before them. The pooling gasoline, a dark, viscous stain spreading relentlessly from beneath the bus, shimmered menacingly in the harsh Arizona sun, its fumes rising like an invisible, suffocating shroud. Each fresh crackle from the downed power line, each angry blue spark that danced erratically on the parched earth, sent a fresh wave of terror through the onlookers, whose shouts of alarm and contradictory advice only added to the terrifying cacophony, drowning out any coherent thought. Ms. Evans, despite the throbbing pain in her ankle, dragged herself closer to the broken window, her gaze fixed on Ethan. She saw the raw, desperate urgency in his eyes, a silent scream that resonated with a primal fear now gripping her own heart. She tried to shout, to articulate the danger Ethan was conveying, but her voice was hoarse, lost in the escalating din. Mr. Caldwell, meanwhile, had taken center stage, his booming voice attempting to impose order, but only succeeding in amplifying the chaos. "Someone get a rope! We need to pull it back upright," he bellowed, completely misjudging the immediate threat. His words, though loud, were empty of true understanding, a hollow drumbeat against the rising tide of panic, a stark contrast to the silent, acute perception of the boy he so readily dismissed. Ethan, Seeing Ms. Evans' struggle and Mr. Caldwell's misguided efforts, felt a surge of frustrated despair. He continued to point, to gesture, to trace the deadly arc of the power line and the spreading pool of fuel with his hands, his small body vibrating with the intensity of his unspoken warning. He tried to grab Mr. Caldwell's sleeve, to force his attention to the true danger, but the man merely brushed him off impatiently, his eyes scanning the scene for a group of strong men to organize, completely oblivious to the ticking time bomb beneath their feet. The limitations of spoken language, of conventional thought, were starkly evident. The adults, trapped in their own noisy panic, simply could not perceive the subtle, yet critical, signs that screamed disaster to Ethan's heightened senses, leaving him unheard amidst the escalating peril. "Boy, I told you to stay back." Mr. Caldwell snarled, his face contorted in a mix of irritation and fear as he finally turned to confront Ethan, whose insistent gestures were becoming an undeniable nuisance. "You're just scaring the others. Go find your mother. This is no place for a boy like you." His words, laced with disdain, cut through Ethan more deeply than any physical blow, reinforcing the societal prejudice that equated his muteness with intellectual deficiency. He even took a step, physically interposing himself between Ethan and Ms. Evans, effectively blocking the crucial line of silent communication. The older man's dismissive glare, a familiar barrier to Ethan's insights, cemented the bitter reality that his most vital warnings were not just unheard, but actively suppressed by the very people he desperately sought to protect. A sudden, violent surge of electricity ripped through the downed power line, sending a shower of angry sparks directly onto the parched earth beside the growing gasoline puddle. A small, dry mesquite branch, barely visible a moment before, instantly burst into a tiny, hungry flame, its acrid smoke mingling with the sweet, cloying scent of fuel. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers, their panicked shouts now tinged with genuine terror. The air crackled with palpable tension, the heat from the small fire a stark, horrifying beacon against the bus. The metal skin of the vehicle, superheated by the sun and friction, seemed to hum ominously, a silent countdown ticking beneath the surface, each second bringing the inevitable closer, the danger now undeniable, even to the most oblivious. Inside the bus, Lily, her small face streaked with tears and dust, watched the tiny flame flicker, her eyes widening with dawning horror. She looked at Ethan, then at the sparking wire, then back at Ethan, a silent plea passing between them. Mr. Caldwell, finally seeing the real, immediate threat of the fire, began to shout contradictory orders, his booming voice now laced with genuine fear, adding to the chaotic din. The other adults, frozen in indecision, looked from the burning branch to the trapped children, their faces etched with despair. The conventional solutions had failed, and the clock was ticking, a silent, terrifying countdown. All eyes, though unknowingly, would soon turn to the silent boy outside, the only one who seemed to truly grasp the intricate puzzle of peril, but how could he make them understand before it was too late? The tiny flame, a hungry orange beacon against the drab desert earth, now licked greedily at the dry brush, its heat radiating outwards, intensifying the already oppressive warmth. A collective shriek of pure terror erupted from the gathered townsfolk as the fire, fueled by the parched mesquite, began to spread, inching ever closer to the dark, shimmering pool of gasoline beneath the overturned bus. The air, thick with the acrid scent of burning foliage mixed with the sweet, cloying fumes of fuel, became a suffocating blanket of dread. Cries for help turned into desperate, incoherent shouts, a cacophony of fear that paralyzed the adults, their faces reflecting a horrifying realization of the imminent catastrophe. Ethan, standing outside the bus, felt the heat on his skin, the ground vibrating with frantic energy, the situation now screaming for immediate, decisive action. Mr. Caldwell, despite the undeniable evidence of the fire, remained stubbornly fixated on his own, flawed solutions, his booming voice cutting through the panic with an almost pathetic insistence. "Water! Someone get water!" he bellowed, completely oblivious to the electrical hazard and the futility of water on a gasoline fire. He spotted Ethan, still gesturing frantically, and his face contorted into a familiar sneer of irritation. "I told you, boy, get out of the way! You're just a distraction!" He gestured dismissively with a broad hand, a literal and symbolic wave that pushed Ethan further to the periphery, reinforcing the painful, long-held belief that the mute boy was nothing more than a hindrance, his silent warnings dismissed as meaningless flailings in a crisis too complex for his perceived limited understanding. The sting of Mr. Caldwell's words, sharp and familiar, pierced through Ethan's urgent resolve. A wave of profound insecurity washed over him, the weight of a lifetime of being unheard crashing down with paralyzing force. His small hands, moments before carving desperate warnings in the air, now clenched into tight fists, his nails digging into his palms. He felt the smooth, comforting surface of his Riverstone, a tactile anchor that usually steadied him, but even its familiar presence couldn't quell the rising tide of doubt. How could he, a boy whose voice was a silent scream, make these unseeing adults comprehend the intricate escalating dance of disaster unfolding before their very eyes? The pressure was immense, the lives of his friends hanging precariously in the balance, and the familiar wall of dismissal loomed larger than ever. From within the bus, Ms. Evans, her eyes now clearing somewhat despite the searing pain in her ankle, saw the raw despair on Ethan's face. She had witnessed his silent intelligence countless times in her classroom, his uncanny ability to grasp concepts others struggled with. She understood the crushing weight of his unheard voice. With a tremendous effort, she dragged herself closer to the broken window, meeting his gaze with an unwavering intensity. Her lips, though unable to form coherent words due to her dazed state, formed a silent, encouraging message. "Trust. I see you." Simultaneously, Lily, still trapped but her eyes fixed on Ethan, offered a small, tearful nod, a silent plea, and a powerful testament of faith from his closest ally, a lifeline thrown across the chaos. Emboldened by their silent encouragement, a flicker of renewed determination ignited within Ethan. The self-doubt, though still a cold tendril, receded as his extraordinary mind snapped into full, silent operation. He absorbed every detail, the subtle shift in the wind carrying the smoke, the exact trajectory of the sparks from the power line, the subtle gradient of the ground beneath the pooling gasoline, the precise angle of the bus's chassis, and the terrified, trapped children within. His thoughts raced, a complex, wordless equation solving itself in his mind, mapping out the variables of danger and the precise sequence of actions required for a successful, swift evacuation. The chaos around him faded, replaced by the crystal-clear logic of his strategic analysis. The hesitation was gone, replaced by a fierce, silent resolve. Ethan's dark eyes, no longer clouded by doubt, scanned the ground with a focused intensity, searching for the perfect tool, the optimal path. His small frame, usually unassuming, now seemed to vibrate with a newfound purpose, a silent energy that promised action. He took a deep, steadying breath, the scent of burning mesquite and gasoline momentarily forgotten as his mind locked onto the solution. He knew what he had to do, the precise steps to take. The time for silent pleas was over. He was no longer just an observer, but a participant, a silent force ready to cut through the chaos, to take an active role in saving those he cared for, his unique genius finally unleashed. The external cacophony, a chaotic symphony of shouting voices and terrified whimpers, began to recede for Ethan, not fading entirely, but transforming into a dull, distant hum, much like the rhythmic thrum of the bus engine he was accustomed to. His world, usually a carefully ordered tapestry of visual cues, now demanded an even greater level of precision. The swirling dust, once a blinding shroud, became a dynamic canvas, each eddy and current revealing subtle air movements essential for predicting the fire's spread. The raw, guttural fear emanating from the adults, a palpable vibration in the air, was filtered out, allowing his hyper-focused perception to zero in on the immediate, tangible threats. He felt the dry, gritty earth beneath his bare feet, a solid anchor amidst the swirling uncertainty, his small body grounding itself for the monumental task ahead, creating a silent, self-contained sphere of acute awareness in the heart of the pandemonium. Within this newfound, almost meditative silence, Ethan's mind, a silent, sophisticated processor, began to rapidly compute the intricate variables of the unfolding disaster. The oppressive heat, intensified by the burgeoning flame, was not just discomfort but a critical data point, indicating the proximity of danger and the rapid consumption of oxygen. His dark eyes, now scanning with surgical precision, tracked the erratic dance of blue sparks from the high-tension cable, mapping their trajectory and assessing their potential to ignite the volatile gasoline. The viscous pool of fuel, shimmering ominously, revealed its exact flow rate and spread pattern, a liquid clock ticking down to catastrophe. Each fractured piece of the bus, every twisted piece of metal, became an element in a complex, three-dimensional puzzle, his genius for strategic analysis blossoming in the face of overwhelming odds, a silent, internal blueprint for survival forming with astonishing speed and clarity. A fleeting glance, a silent pact, passed between Ethan and Ms. Evans. Her eyes, though still clouded with pain and shock, held a flicker of recognition, a deep well of trust that transcended the chaos. She saw not just a frightened child, but the intelligent boy, whose silent wisdom had often surprised her in the classroom, understanding the crushing weight of his unheard voice. From within the bus, Lily, her small face streaked with tears and dust, mirrored Ms. Evans' silent affirmation, a tearful nod that spoke volumes of unwavering faith. This unspoken connection, a shared understanding in a world filled with misinterpretation, acted like a powerful current, flowing through Ethan, bolstering his resolve and granting him the mental space, the permission, to fully unleash his unique gift, transforming his isolation into a conduit for profound, shared purpose. The townsfolk, however, remained largely oblivious, their faces a mixture of confusion and growing alarm, their shouts of advice still a cacophony of contradictory solutions. Mr. Caldwell, his face a mask of bluster and self-importance, continued to bark orders, his voice reverberating with misguided authority, completely missing the subtle shift in Ethan's demeanor. He saw only a child stubbornly refusing to, quote, get out of the way, his ingrained prejudice blinding him to the boy's focused intent. Some adults, catching a glimpse of Ethan's purposeful movements, exchanged bewildered glances, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. They couldn't reconcile the frantic, dismissed child with the now resolute figure, whose silent intensity seemed to contradict their preconceived notions of his incapacity, a silent challenge to their collective understanding of the crisis. Ethan's gaze swept across the parched earth, searching not for a voice but for a tool, a physical extension of his silent will. His eyes landed on a sturdy, gnarled mesquite branch discarded near the road, its rough bark a familiar texture from countless hours on the farm. This simple stick, seemingly insignificant, became his immediate instrument. He would use it to clear debris, to draw his critical warnings in the dust, and, most crucially, to manipulate the dangerously writhing power line. His small, worn notebook and pencil, usually his primary means of detailed communication, remained tucked away. This situation demanded immediate, physical action, a silent symphony of movement rather than written words. His hands, though small, were strong and agile, accustomed to the demanding labor of farm life, ready to execute the precise movements his mind had already mapped out with unwavering certainty. With the mesquite branch firmly in his grasp, Ethan took a deep, steadying breath, the acrid scent of burning brush and gasoline now a sharp, motivating sting rather than a paralyzing fear. His body tensed, every muscle coiled with purpose. The plan, intricate and precise, unfolded in his mind with crystalline clarity. The exact sequence of movements, the precise angles, the crucial timing. He was no longer just perceiving the disaster. He was about to actively engage with it, to bend its chaotic elements to his silent will. He cast one last look towards Ms. Evans and Lily, their unspoken trust, a powerful, invisible shield against the lingering doubt. Then, with a fierce, silent resolve that belied his young age, Ethan took a decisive step, moving with an almost preternatural calm towards the heart of the danger, ready to transform his silent genius into life-saving action. With the gnarled mesquite branch clutched firmly, Ethan moved with a newfound, silent authority. His dark eyes, honed by years of observing the intricate dance of the desert, zeroed in on the writhing, high-tension cable. He knew the dry wood, though not a perfect insulator, offered enough resistance for a brief, critical maneuver. With precise, measured movements, he used the branch to hook the sparking wire, gently, yet firmly, nudging it away from the bus's underbelly and the rapidly expanding pool of gasoline. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers as the furious blue sparks, moments before dancing menacingly, now arced harmlessly onto barren rock. A few feet further away, the acrid smell of ozone lessened, replaced momentarily by the faint, earthy scent of disturbed soil, a fleeting micro-victory that brought a brief, shaky silence to the chaotic scene, a silent testament to his urgent, calculated intervention. "What in the blazes are you doing, boy?" Mr. Caldwell's booming voice shattered the fragile calm, his face contorted in a furious mask of disbelief and anger. He strode purposefully towards Ethan, his heavy boots kicking up dust, completely oblivious to the precision of the boy's actions. "Get away from that wire! You'll get us all killed with your foolishness." His dismissive hand gestures, meant to shoo Ethan away, nearly knocked the mesquite branch from the boy's grasp, a physical embodiment of the societal barrier Ethan constantly faced. The man's ingrained prejudice, his inability to see past Ethan's muteness, transformed a life-saving maneuver into a reckless act, adding a layer of infuriating human obstruction to the already dire physical threat. The shouts of other townsfolk, confused by Caldwell's outburst, swelled again, their voices adding to the renewed cacophony of fear and misunderstanding. The momentary relief evaporated as quickly as it had formed. Just as Ethan had successfully moved the main section of the live wire, a smaller, thinner branch, previously hidden, snapped under the bus's weight, sending a fresh shower of sparks dangerously close to the now larger gasoline puddle. The tiny mesquite flame, though momentarily starved of direct contact with the main wire, still licked hungrily at the dry earth, its orange glow a terrifying beacon. Ethan's shoulders slumped, a fleeting moment of profound frustration washing over him. He had anticipated the main threat, but this secondary, unpredictable element, combined with Mr. Caldwell's relentless interference, threatened to undo his progress. The weight of being unheard, of having his precise actions misinterpreted, pressed down on him, a heavy, suffocating blanket of despair, even as the scent of gasoline grew stronger, a silent clock ticking faster. His internal monologue, a silent torrent of calculations, quickly regained its focus. The slight shift in the wind, a barely perceptible whisper across the desert floor, indicated the fire's potential direction. He saw a shallow depression in the earth, a natural channel carved by past monsoon rains, and an idea sparked in his mind, a silent, intricate plan. He dropped the mesquite branch and, with astonishing speed, began to use his agile hands, and even his bare feet, to kick and scrape at the dry, loose soil, forming a rudimentary berm, a low earthen barrier. His movements were fluid, economical, each scoop of dirt deliberate, designed to divert the flow of the spreading gasoline away from the bus and the still smoldering brush. He worked with the focused intensity of a sculptor, shaping the very ground beneath him, his unique spatial understanding translating into a desperate, silent act of engineering. "What's the boy doing now, digging in the dirt like a gopher?" Mr. Caldwell scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain, completely misinterpreting Ethan's feverish, focused work. He turned to the other townsfolk, waving his arms dramatically. "We need to get a hose, a bucket brigade, not whatever this is." Some onlookers, swayed by Caldwell's bluster, began to murmur agreement, their confusion deepening. Others, however, particularly those who had witnessed Ethan's earlier successful redirection of the power line, exchanged hesitant glances, a flicker of doubt in their eyes, a nascent, unspoken question about who truly understood the unfolding crisis. The tension between Caldwell's loud, misguided authority and Ethan's quiet, purposeful action became a palpable force, splitting the crowd into a silent, undecided jury as the bus groaned ominously. Ethan ignored the derisive comments, his small hands working with furious precision. The berm, though low, was forming rapidly, a crude but effective earthen dam. He kicked a final clump of earth into place, his breath ragged, and then, with a desperate sweeping gesture, pointed towards the rising ground just beyond the bus, indicating a slightly higher, safer area where the fuel would naturally pool and dissipate, away from the immediate danger. A small trickle of gasoline, now diverted by his improvised barrier, began to seep harmlessly into the parched earth, a visible, undeniable triumph. The immediate threat of a catastrophic explosion was lessened, but not eliminated. The bus still listed precariously, and the trapped children, including Lily, watched from within, their wide eyes fixed on Ethan, a silent plea for the next miracle, as the sirens of distant help grew slightly louder, yet still too far. With the gnarled mesquite branch clutched firmly, Ethan moved with a newfound, silent authority, his focus unwavering amidst the swirling dust and mounting terror. His dark eyes, honed by years of observing the intricate dance of the desert, zeroed in on the writhing, high-tension cable, its angry blue sparks spitting like a coiled serpent. He knew the dry wood, though not a perfect insulator, offered enough resistance for a brief, critical maneuver, a calculated risk his silent mind had already assessed. He felt the subtle vibrations of the earth, the frantic pulse of the unfolding disaster, but his internal world remained a calm, logical sanctuary. The acrid scent of ozone and the cloying sweetness of gasoline were sharp warnings, but also data points, confirming the urgency of his precise, pre-visualized intervention, the lives of his friends hanging on his silent, determined actions. With precise, measured movements, a silent ballet of calculated risk, Ethan used the branch to hook the sparking wire, gently, yet firmly, nudging it away from the bus's superheated underbelly and the rapidly expanding pool of gasoline. A collective gasp, a ragged, terrified exhale, rippled through the onlookers as the furious blue sparks, moments before dancing menacingly close, now arced harmlessly onto barren rock a few feet further away. The acrid smell of ozone lessened, replaced momentarily by the faint earthy scent of disturbed soil, a fleeting micro-victory that brought a brief, shaky silence to the chaotic scene, a silent testament to his urgent, calculated intervention. The air, thick with unspoken dread, still hummed with danger, but a crucial fuse had been removed, a silent, powerful step towards averting utter catastrophe. "What in the blazes are you doing, boy?" Mr. Caldwell's booming voice shattered the fragile calm, his face contorted in a furious mask of disbelief and anger, his bluster undiminished by the visible success. He strode purposefully towards Ethan, his heavy boots kicking up dust, completely oblivious to the precision of the boy's actions, his mind still stubbornly fixed on his own flawed solutions. "Get away from that wire. You'll get us all killed with your foolishness." His dismissive hand gestures, meant to shoo Ethan away, nearly knocked the mesquite branch from the boy's grasp, a physical embodiment of the societal barrier Ethan constantly faced, his vital contribution dismissed as reckless child's play, a bitter pill to swallow amidst the escalating peril. But just as Caldwell's bluster reached its peak, a small, almost imperceptible snap echoed from beneath the bus, a sound drowned out by the renewed shouts but keenly registered by Ethan's heightened senses. It was the bus battery, jostled loose by the impact, creating a tiny, hungry spark. With horrifying swiftness, the spark found the thin, shimmering film of gasoline that had seeped beyond Ethan's crude berm. A sudden, terrifying WH* erupted, a controlled flare of orange and yellow light, as the small amount of fuel ignited. The ground trembled, and a wave of intense heat washed over the scene, forcing the onlookers to instinctively recoil, their collective gasp now a primal shriek of terror, convinced the worst had arrived. Yet, to their astonishment, the explosion was contained. The flames, though fierce and momentarily blinding, remained localized, consuming only the diverted gasoline. Ethan, without hesitation, spun towards the bus, his hand chopping the air, pointing with desperate urgency to the opposite side, to the emergency exit nobody had noticed beneath the crumpled metal. His eyes locked on to Ms. Evans, then Lily, a silent, commanding plea for them to understand. Ms. Evans, despite her pain, understood, her eyes widening with dawning comprehension. "The other side, the emergency exit," she croaked, her voice hoarse but clear, cutting through the fear. A desperate, shared command passed through the shattered bus window. Mr. Caldwell, his face a mask of ash and disbelief, stumbled back, his eyes fixed on the contained blaze, then on the stream of children, led by Lily, now scrambling from the previously unseen exit on the opposite side of the bus. The horrifying truth, clear and undeniable, slammed into him with the force of a physical blow. The boy he had dismissed, the defective, mute child, had not only predicted the danger, but had systematically disarmed it, his silent, precise actions saving every life. A profound, collective silence, heavier than any spoken word, fell over Harmony Ridge as they watched the last child emerge, safe and sound. The small fire a testament not to disaster, but to a silent, extraordinary triumph. The WHOOMPH* had been terrifying, a primal roar of fire that momentarily blinded and deafened the onlookers, sending a collective shriek echoing across the parched landscape. But as their eyes adjusted, they saw not a raging inferno, but a fierce, localized blaze, contained to the shallow depression Ethan had so frantically scraped into the earth. The gasoline, now diverted, burned itself out with astonishing speed, a fiery testament to his silent, desperate engineering. Ms. Evans, her face streaked with dirt and awe, had immediately pointed to the emergency exit, her hoarse cries now echoing Ethan's silent directive. Lily, her small, brave heart pounding, was already pulling herself through the twisted metal, guiding the younger children with a newfound, trembling courage, their small figures emerging from the wreckage like fragile butterflies from a cocoon, blinking in the harsh Arizona sun, their lives miraculously spared. A wave of sheer, overwhelming relief washed over the scene, a palpable release of tension that left many townsfolk weak at the knees. Shouts of panic transformed into choked sobs of joy, parents rushing forward to embrace their dust-streaked, whimpering children, pulling them into tight, desperate hugs. The air, still carrying the acrid scent of smoke and the lingering sweetness of gasoline, was now filled with the sound of tearful reunions, the soft murmur of comfort, and the collective, shaky breaths of a community teetering on the brink and now pulling back. The distant wail of sirens, once a source of frantic hope, now felt like a gentle lullaby, a confirmation that help was truly on its way, but that the immediate, catastrophic danger had been averted by an unseen hand, a silent miracle in the heart of Harmony Ridge. Ethan stood a few feet from the bus, a small, unmoving figure amidst the swirling, emotional storm. His dark eyes, usually so sharp and analytical, now held a deep, quiet exhaustion, the immense mental strain of the past minutes finally settling upon him. The acrid scent of burning mesquite and the metallic tang of the bus still clung to his clothes, a sensory reminder of the peril he had just navigated. He watched as Lily, her small face illuminated by the dawning relief, emerged from the bus, safe, her eyes immediately finding his, a silent, profound understanding passing between them. Then, Miss Evans, limping but alive, her gaze also fixed on him, a wordless gratitude shining in her tear-filled eyes. He didn't seek recognition. His focus remained on the safety of those he cared for, the silent guardian of his small, familiar world. Mr. Caldwell, a man whose bluster had always filled every room and conversation, now stood utterly silent, his face a mask of ash and profound disbelief. The contained fire, burning safely in the depression Ethan had dug, flickered in his eyes, a searing indictment of his own arrogance and dismissiveness. He watched the children, led by Lily, scramble from the emergency exit he had completely overlooked, the very exit Ethan had desperately tried to show him. His previous pronouncements about the boy being, quote, defective and a nuisance, now echoed hollowly in his own ears, a bitter, humiliating melody. His jaw was slack, his shoulders slumped, the weight of his profound misjudgment crushing his usual self-importance. He had been utterly, spectacularly wrong, and the silent, undeniable truth of Ethan's heroism was a defeat more crushing than any spoken rebuke. As the initial wave of relief subsided, a new, powerful emotion began to ripple through the townsfolk, awe. They looked from the safely emerging children to the contained fire. And then, slowly, their gazes settled on Ethan. The boy they had so often overlooked, the silent child they had dismissed, had just saved their children, their future. A profound sense of shame, mingled with overwhelming gratitude. Murmurs began to spread, not of panic, but of bewildered admiration. Some parents, still trembling from the shock, gently detached themselves from their children and took hesitant steps towards Ethan, their eyes conveying a mixture of respect and a newfound, almost reverent, understanding. The silence that had once defined him as an outsider now enshrined him as their quiet, undeniable hero, a beacon of hope emerging from the dust. The distant sirens, now deafeningly close, finally materialized into the flashing lights of fire trucks and ambulances, their arrival puncturing the fragile calm. First responders, their faces grim and professional, quickly assessed the scene, their trained eyes immediately recognizing the ingenious, life-saving measures that had been taken. They saw the expertly diverted power line, the contained gasoline fire, and the perfectly executed evacuation through the unnoticed emergency exit. Their nods of approval, their quiet, respectful glances towards Ethan, were a powerful, unspoken confirmation of his extraordinary actions. The community, witnessing this official validation, felt a surge of pride and profound respect for their quiet prodigy. Ethan, though still silent, was no longer invisible. His actions had spoken volumes, forever changing the narrative of Harmony Ridge and setting the stage for a recognition that would echo far beyond the dusty roads of their small Arizona town. The cacophony of sirens, a blaring crescendo, finally dissolved into the urgent, disciplined movements of first responders, firefighters, their faces grim beneath heavy helmets, moved with practiced efficiency around the still smoldering bus, assessing the scene. Their trained eyes, accustomed to disaster, quickly registered the expertly diverted power line, the miraculously contained gasoline fire in the makeshift berm, and the clear path to the emergency exit, all evidence of an extraordinary intervention. Quiet, respectful nods passed between the seasoned professionals as their gazes, almost instinctively, found Ethan, standing small and still amidst the swirling dust. His exhaustion was palpable, etched onto his young features, but as the paramedics began tending to the injured, the community, watching these skilled individuals validate the boy's actions, felt a profound surge of awe. The initial, raw terror began to give way to a burgeoning understanding, a silent, collective realization of the silent miracle they had just witnessed. As the immediate danger subsided, a new, powerful current flowed through the stunned crowd, a collective, profound shame. The faces that had so readily dismissed Ethan, that had seen only silence and perceived incapacity, now crumpled, with an overwhelming realization of their error. Parents, their voices still hoarse from panic, gently released their children, their eyes fixed on the small boy. Hesitantly, a few took tentative steps towards him, their hands reaching out not in pity, but in a gesture of deep, unspoken gratitude. Mr. Caldwell, still ashen-faced, remained rooted to the spot, his usual bluster deflated, his gaze fixed on Ethan. He didn't move, but the rigid set of his shoulders had softened, and a flicker of something akin to humility, a rare and uncomfortable emotion for him, crossed his eyes, a silent acknowledgment of the boy's undeniable heroism, a shift in perception that spoke louder than any apology. Ms. Evans, though still limping and pale, had managed to free herself from the paramedics' gentle care. Her eyes, brimming with unshed tears, were fixed on Ethan, a silent plea for connection. She moved towards him, her injured ankle protesting with every step, but her resolve unwavering. As she reached him, she knelt, oblivious to the dust and debris, and gently placed a hand on his shoulder, her gaze meeting his with an intensity that transcended words. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "you saved them. All of them. I always knew you saw things differently, but thank you, thank you." Her voice was a fragile thread of sound, but her eyes, deep and knowing, conveyed a profound gratitude and an unshakable belief in his extraordinary mind, a silent promise of advocacy and unwavering support that finally broke through the boy's stoic facade, touching his very soul. Within minutes, the Harmony Ridge fire chief, a grizzled man named Chief Ramirez, his face usually stern, stepped forward, his voice cutting through the remaining murmurs with solemn respect. He spoke directly to the assembled community, his words slow and deliberate. "What happened here today was a tragedy averted, thanks to the extraordinary courage and quick thinking of one young man. Ethan, you are a hero." He gestured towards Ethan, and a wave of applause, hesitant at first, then thunderous, erupted, echoing off the adobe walls. Chief Ramirez then announced a newly established Harmony Ridge Hero Fund for Ethan's future education, and an invitation for him to visit the state capitol, where his unique insights could be shared with emergency services. The community's cheers were deafening, a chorus of newfound admiration for the boy who had once been so easily overlooked, his silent actions now celebrated with booming, public recognition. Overwhelmed, Ethan's small frame trembled almost imperceptibly as the applause washed over him, a sound he felt more than heard, a powerful vibration that resonated deep within his chest. A faint, almost shy smile touched his lips, a rare glimpse into the profound joy bubbling within him. For the first time he felt truly seen, truly valued, not as a defective child, but as an indispensable part of his community. People no longer spoke over him. Instead, they watched him, waiting for his gestures, seeking his silent input on even minor details of the ongoing cleanup. Mr. Caldwell, from the edge of the crowd, slowly, deliberately, nodded at Ethan, a single, solemn gesture of genuine, humbled respect that spoke volumes. It was a silent acknowledgement of a profound shift. The barrier between them shattered, replaced by a nascent, unfamiliar sense of equality, a testament to the power of action over words. The dusty roads of Harmony Ridge would never feel the same to Ethan. His life, once a quiet, predictable rhythm of farm chores and silent observation, had irrevocably changed. He was no longer the invisible boy, but a recognized hero, his unique abilities now celebrated, not dismissed. Invitations for specialized educational programs began to arrive from distant cities, offering a future far beyond the familiar mesquite-scented air of Harmony Ridge. The town itself, jolted by the near catastrophe, embraced a new ethos of inclusion, inspired by Ethan's silent triumph. Programs to understand and support children with diverse needs were swiftly implemented, a direct legacy of his courage. As the Arizona sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in fiery hues, Ethan looked towards the horizon, Lily's hand finding his, a silent promise of a future where his voice, though unspoken, would resonate with profound and lasting impact, a ripple effect reaching far beyond their quiet desert home. 2 years later, the Arizona sun still blazed, but its light now fell upon a different Harmony Ridge and a profoundly transformed Ethan. He sat not on a rattling school bus but in a sun-drenched classroom at the Phoenix Institute for Sensory Arts, a prestigious program that had sought him out after his story echoed far beyond the desert. The air here, though still carrying the dry scent of mesquite from the nearby botanical garden, hummed with a different kind of energy, intellectual curiosity, and quiet collaboration. Ethan, now 14, was designing complex irrigation systems for arid lands, his silent insights flowing onto digital blueprints with the same precision he once displayed in the dust. His dark eyes, still piercing, absorbed every nuance of the advanced software, translating abstract data into tangible, sustainable solutions, his unique genius finding its grandest stage yet, a silent architect building a better future. Back in Harmony Ridge, the old general store, once a bastion of Mr. Caldwell's bluster, now featured a prominent sign, hand-painted by Ms. Evans, "Todos son bienvenidos," all are welcome. The town, shaken by the bus accident and awakened by Ethan's heroism, had embraced a new ethos. Weekly community meetings now included a dedicated segment for silent voices, where residents were encouraged to share insights through drawings, gestures, or written notes, ensuring everyone felt heard. Mr. Caldwell, though still gruff, occasionally offered Ethan a hesitant, almost respectful nod when he visited, a silent acknowledgement of the shift. The school, in particular, had implemented a robust program for sensory integration, inspired by Ethan's story, fostering an environment where every child's unique way of perceiving the world was not just accommodated, but celebrated, a living testament to newfound understanding. Ethan often returned to Harmony Ridge, the familiar scent of his mother's cooking, frijoles simmering on the stove, grounding him. His familia, pillars of unwavering support, continued to be his anchor, their hands speaking volumes of love and pride. His grandmother, Abuela Elena, with her weathered hands and ancient wisdom, would often trace the sign for strength on his palm, a silent blessing that connected him to generations of resilience. His story, told in hushed tones by his parents, became a beacon of *Fe and *Solidaridad* within their tight-knit Mexican-American community, a testament to the belief that even in silence, one could find a profound voice, and that collective compassion could transform adversity into unexpected triumph. He carried their quiet encouragement like a warm, protective cloak, a constant reminder of where his true power originated. The tale of the hero's silence resonated far beyond the dusty roads of Harmony Ridge, becoming a whispered legend of quiet power. It was a potent, living testament that true value was not measured by spoken words or outward displays, but by the courage of one's actions and the depth of one's heart. Ethan's journey proved that every perceived limitation could, in fact, be a unique strength, a different lens through which to perceive and solve the world's complexities. His silent heroism inspired countless others to look beyond superficial appearances, to seek the hidden brilliance in those often overlooked, fostering a profound shift in perspective that championed empathy, inclusion, and the unwavering belief in the inherent worth of every individual, regardless of how they communicated their truth to the world. One warm evening, as the Arizona sky bled from fiery orange to deep indigo, Ethan sat beside Lily on the porch swing of his adobe home. The air was cool, carrying the sweet perfume of night-blooming cereus. He held his smooth riverstone, its familiar weight a comforting presence in his palm. Lily, her head resting on his shoulder, hummed a quiet, off-key tune. He looked up at the vast, star-dusted canvas above them, the infinite silence of the cosmos, mirroring the profound stillness within him. He felt the subtle vibrations of the crickets, the gentle sway of the swing, and the warmth of Lily's hand finding his. A silent conversation passing between them that transcended any need for words, a perfect, unspoken understanding. He closed his eyes, a serene smile touching his lips. In that moment, he wasn't defined by what he couldn't say, but by the boundless world he could see and do. The scent of damp earth after a distant rain, the faint murmur of his family inside, the gentle pressure of Lily's hand. These were the symphony of his life, rich and full. His greatest strength was not his silence, but the clarity it afforded him, the ability to perceive truths others missed. As the first star shone brightly above Harmony Ridge, a silent promise, he knew his voice, though unheard, would forever echo in the ripples of change he had set in motion, a beacon of hope for all who dared to listen with their hearts.